Now, our next keynote speech presenter is Mr. Hans Tung, the managing partner of GGV Capital. Mr. Tung will be sharing the keynote speech topic, Unicorns and Entrepreneurship in China versus US versus India. Let's give a big welcome to Mr. Hans Tung.
Hi, it's good to be here. GGV manages about $3.9 billion US, investing mostly in US and China. We've been an investor in a small company back in 2003 called Alibaba. Back then, the valuation for Alibaba was around $200 million. What is the market cap of Alibaba today? Anyone know? It's about 200 billion right now. So the valuation went from 200 million in 2003 to 200 billion last year. So in a 12-year period, it grew by 1,000x. Personally, I was also an investor in a very small company back in 2010. The name of the company is called Xiaomi. So the valuation of Xiaomi when I invested was about 20 million pre. And anyone know the valuation of Xiaomi today? 50, close. That's around there. So it grew from 2010, 20 million to 46 billion last year. So also grew 1,000x in about 5 years. So the definition of unicorn is a company that could be either public or private, and the valuation of a company is over $1 billion US. And my talk, I'll keep it short in 20 minutes. If you have any question, feel free to interrupt me. I can speak both in English and Chinese. I've been asked to speak in English so that the broadcasting effect to people outside of this area around the world will be good. But I'm happy to respond to questions in Chinese if needed. So, okay. So we have 6 partners at GGV. 3 of us are based in Silicon Valley. 2 of us are based in Shanghai. I split my time between 2 places and invest in both markets. Fortunately, because of my investment in Xiaomi, also Airbnb and Wish and Xiaohongshu, I've been on the Forbes Midas list of the top 100 VC in the world 4 years in a row, between 2013 and 2016. And because I live in the Bay Area, I appear on Bloomberg and CNBC a lot, talking about trends, tech trends in China vis-a-vis the US. This is how we invest. We analyze the trends and figure out within the trends what are the most interesting companies that we think can be disruptive. Because for you to be a big company like a unicorn, you have to be focusing on a trend that's disruptive to give you a chance to create a big company. And these companies are always controversial at a time of investment. Let me do a quick math. If we run a $200 million fund, invest roughly in 20 companies, and our goal for LP is for 2.5x return, we need to give back from a $200 million fund, $500 million US. That's a 2.5x return for our investors. But how do you get to a $500 million return to investors? If each company you put in about 10 million, you end up with a 20 company portfolio. Of the 20 companies that we invest, assume that we always have 20% stake in those companies. From 500 million, 20% stake, that means our 20 investments must have 2.5 billion US dollars in total market value. That's roughly around 4 or 5 IPOs. So out of the 20 portfolio companies, 4 of them have to go IPO for us to get 2.5x return. That's a 25% IPO hit rate, which is not easy. So what happened is that most of the time with VC funds, you have companies that have a decent return, maybe 3x or 5x, but you need one company or two in a portfolio that have a huge breakout, like an Alibaba or like a Xiaomi. And we look at investments in Taiwan, there tend to be a lot of pre-IPO investments. And the strategics like ASUS, TSMC, UMC, MediaTek, Foxconn do a lot of strategic investments up front. In the US and China, you have people investing in 4 different stages. Very early on, seed, Series A, where the company may be anywhere between 4 to 6 years before IPO, sometimes even longer. People looking for a 10x return. Then they are sort of growth stage investments, where a company will be 2 to 4 years, most likely 4 years before IPO. And then there are PE funds who need to have high hit ratio to invest in a company pre-IPO. This is where most Taiwan VC invest. This is where most Chinese VCs invest here and here, as well as in the US. For us, we do all stages, but around sectors. So I focus on ecommerce and social. That's my primary sector. I also look at IoT investments. This is why companies like Alibaba, Xiaohongshu, Wish are kind of investments I make. I'm a personal investor in 91 Mai in Taipei as well. And we also invest around the Xiaomi ecosystem in IoT. Living in the Bay Area, we watch a lot of Warriors game. I grew up in Taiwan, went to LA when I was 13, so I became a Laker fan as well. And I love watching basketball because how championship teams form is very similar how we invest in early stage companies and help them to grow. One of the things I love to read about is about Kobe's work ethic. Who follows Kobe Bryant in this audience? Who watches NBA here? Okay. One of the most memorable quotes that Kobe said that I remember is that he asked a reporter, what does it take to be successful? He asked the reporter, do you know what 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in LA looks like? I do. I wake up early, 20 years in a row, not missing a day. So if someone who's as successful and rich as Kobe Bryant can do this every single day, 20 years in a row, he's not doing it for the money anymore. He's doing it because he wants to win. So the kind of companies that we invest that end up making huge difference to become unicorn, the CEO have this strong desire to be the best there is, to disrupt everyone and build a dominating franchise. And that kind of ambition and aggressiveness is what we look for in almost all the companies we back. I haven't met any unicorn company that didn't have founders who have the same kind of desire to win. So a friend of mine, Eileen Lee from Cowboy Ventures, she did a study of 84 American unicorns that happened in 2005 and thereafter. And she has done this study 2 years in a row now. I'm sure she'll update the study again this June. Then out of all the unicorns that happened in the last 10 years or so, it's interesting that 2007 produced the most number of unicorns, 23. Companies like Uber, Zenefits, Zynga, a lot of companies, Zynga, all happened during that period. Do you want to take a guess as why 2007 is extra special? What happened in 2007? That's part of it, yes. Another one. Because if it's a financial crisis, it should happen in 2008. So why makes 2007 different? When did iPhone come out? Beginning of 2006. So if your company happened in 2007, they may start out with PC, but very quickly they see how iPhone start to grow, then add a mobile component to it, and the mobile component ends up sometimes being bigger than the PC web component of their business. So when you start a company, almost coincidentally has to match what is the next big trend, the next big paradigm shift that's happening. One thing that was interesting, that most of the companies that become successful unicorns, out of 84 unicorns, most come out with top Ivy League schools, Stanford or Berkeley. A lot of them, their age is around 30 years in age. Not the young ones, like 20s, that people think are successful in Silicon Valley. For every Mark Zuckerberg out there, there are a lot more entrepreneurs, more like Uber and others, with founders in the 30s. Because those are the founders that have done something once before, a small exit, they have some money in the pocket, and they think very hard about what they want to do next. With one experience already, but they feel that they weren't as successful as they could be, they're much hungrier the second time. And the second time, they're much more likely to do something that's more risky, more disruptive. So one of our theses on what's happening next is that unless the companies can globalize quickly, going after the global market, it's unlikely that they will be unicorn. If you look at the 84 unicorns in the US, most of them, and especially the big ones, have all become global companies. They don't focus just on the US market anymore. They tend to be much more global. And amongst those 84 companies, the biggest ones tend to be facing consumer, not B2B. There are more B2B companies that are unicorns, but their average size in terms of market cap is about 1 to 3 billion. The big ones like Uber and Airbnb have all been facing the consumer. Why is that the case? Why is B2C company more likely, at least the big unicorns, tend to be B2C companies? Why is that? Larger user base, easier to scale. When you take a B2B play, trying to make it cross-border, going to new countries, it's a lot harder. Each businesses in different countries operate differently, whereas consumer, there's more similarity. In Taiwan, we see a lot more B2B companies because the consumer market is smaller, and B2B companies, businesses tend to pay you, so you feel secure that you have contract, you can make money. But at the same time, it's much harder for such Taiwanese company to go global because you do well in business here doesn't mean that business in the US or China will buy your product and services. That's the hardest part for Taiwanese startup to go global. Can Taiwanese startup have operations in China or Japan or US early on? Or the team may have experience in China, Japan, or US market early on to join the team so they can build a global business. We hope that the next generation of Taiwanese company will have R&D center in Taiwan, but have another office, front end, facing consumers either in Japan, China, or US. Without a big home market to tackle, it's hard to be global and hard to be a big unicorn business. So we also did the same thing on China. What are the public or private companies with market cap over $1 billion US? We call them Qilin. So Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu have been the largest. Their market cap is much larger than everyone else combined, but there are roughly 29 publicly listed Qilins. 12 of them happened after 2005. There are 12 of them. And there are 30 Qilins that's private with valuation over $1 billion happened over 2005. And thereafter. So you take 12 plus 30, that's 42. That's half the size of American unicorns. In America, after 2005, up until late 2014, there are 84 unicorns. In China, they are 42 unicorns. You can see that size of the Chinese market enable more unicorns to happen in China versus anywhere else in the world? India, there are only 2. Does anyone know who are the unicorns in India today? It's Flipcar and Snapdeal. Both of them happen to be e-commerce companies. I'm an early investor in Snapdeal, and in 2014, I became a small investor in Flipcar as well. It has been very interesting to see Indian companies go to US to recruit people and go to China to learn business model. I remember hosting Indian teams as early as 2011 to Beijing and Shanghai. I don't see anybody from Taiwan visiting me in Beijing. But the Indian VCs and Indian internet startups come to Beijing and Shanghai. Not only do they meet with us and other VCs in China, they actually print out our portfolio on our website. And they study the business model of every one of the Chinese startups that we invest in, and they ask questions. Why do you think they're doing that? Why would Indian companies care about what Chinese companies are doing? Because India and China both are big domestic market, urbanizing, rising middle class, with internet penetration rate picking up. In China was via PC initially. In India is via smartphone. So anyone know the size of internet users in India today? On smartphone, it's roughly 200 million. That's roughly the size of broadband internet market in China in 2006. So we see a lot of parallel in terms of kind of problems that the Chinese consumer or Chinese startup face with India over a 10-year lag. So it makes sense for Indian companies to come to China to see what has worked, what hasn't worked. Not everything will be the same in India vis-a-vis China, but it's very good for them to hear what we have gone through and ask questions to help them to figure out what would be different or similar in India. And this kind of exchange, we find it very interesting and stimulating. In China, most of the qilings, the Chinese unicorns, tend to be from Zhejiang. Out of the 42 that we told you about earlier that happened after 2005, 6 of them are from Zhejiang. 2 of them are related to Alibaba. Then from Shanxi, there are 3. Fujian, 2. Hubei, 2 unicorns. It's interesting that Zhejiang has produced most number of unicorns founders. The Zhejiang folks have been very active in Beijing, in Shanghai, of course, in Hangzhou as well. But even though Zhejiang produces the most number of unicorns, it's Beijing where the most unicorns are based. Why is that the case? Why is Beijing, which has arguably less attractive a living condition as Shanghai, less cosmopolitan as Shanghai, produce the most number of unicorns? Why is that? Most people from the US think that Shanghai should be the innovation center of China, because Shanghai is a lot more cosmopolitan. It's like New York. And people go to Shanghai, it's very livable. I moved to Shanghai with my family in 2005, and we lived in Shanghai for 6 years. But when it comes to internet, you have to deal with the government, and all the government agencies are in Beijing, so it's much easier to deal with them. Secondly, in Beijing, there's Tsinghua, there's Beida, there's over 100 universities. A lot of them have seen their peers, their alumni, end up building big companies. So they say, if those guys can do it, we can do it too. So it tends to attract more entrepreneurs to go to Beijing and try to build their own empire. Shanghai is interesting as a place to live, but most people in Shanghai tend to want to work for foreign companies or more established companies. So there are fewer entrepreneurs in Shanghai vis-a-vis Beijing. And the schools where the Chinese unicorns are born, it's 50-50 between elite schools and regular schools. In the US, most unicorns are produced by people from Stanford, Berkeley, and Ivy League. In China, it's a lot more equitable. And most of the founders that build unicorns in China, 2/3 of them have not been educated abroad. They're very local. Why is this the case? I remember between 1995 to 2005, most of the successful entrepreneurs in China turned to be returnees that spent some time in the US before starting their startup in China. After 2005, most of the startups in China are started by locals who never went abroad. Because by 2005 and thereafter, Chinese internet market is big enough, there's enough differences between China and US so that just copying from US no longer work. The degree of localization becomes much more significant. Baidu may start off as like the Google of China, but after 2005, it becomes very different. The way to distribute a product, the way to sell advertising, the focus on SMB with a lot more hand-holding, less automation is very different from Google. And if you look at how Alibaba has evolved, you start off as a marketplace like eBay, but by the time it is today, there's a marketplace, there's cloud services, there's financial services, and now they're in entertainment, they're in newspaper media. So Alibaba today looks nothing like eBay. So after 10 years, Chinese startups have all developed local characteristics that's very different from the original US roots. Again, this is the backdrop of how the Chinese internet company become big. The size of the Chinese broadband market and internet market has grown dramatically over the last 15 years. There is about 700 million broadband internet users in China, plus another 600 million smartphone users with broadband internet access in China. There's some overlap, but it's fair to say roughly 800 to 900 million people have access to broadband internet in China. That's a huge, huge market. We also look at, by sector, where the US unicorns and Chinese cheatings come from. In the US, SaaS company is the largest category. Roughly 1/3 of unicorns from the US are SaaS businesses. In China, roughly 1/3 of the cheatings are e-commerce companies. Why do you think that's the case? Why is e-commerce so different? When I moved to China in 2005, e-commerce as percentage of retail was less than 0.1%. What is e-commerce as percentage of retail in Taiwan today? Anyone know? Do people shop on internet? How many people shop on internet here? So roughly 1/3 of people. The penetration rate here, I think, is somewhere around 5 to 6%. In Japan, it's roughly about 3%. E-commerce as a percentage of retail. In the US, with Amazon being very dominant, e-commerce as a percentage of retail is 8%. So what do you think is the penetration rate of e-commerce in China today? 15. 1-5. Almost the highest, amongst the top 3 highest in the world. How's that possible? In 2005, when I moved to China, a lot of smart US VCs went to China as well. And they said, in China, there's no credit card, there's no PayPal, there's no UPS, there's no FedEx, there's no DHL. There's no trust in the ecosystem, in the society. So e-commerce should not happen in China, or at least will take a very, very, very long time. So why is it in only 10 years, e-commerce is 15% of retail in China? You go to a mall in Beijing today, a lot of malls are closing down the stores because the traffic has gone down dramatically. The reason that's the case is that shopping experience in offline in China is not very good. You go to a store, you buy something, as soon as you buy it, it's yours. Most stores will not allow you to return it. You maybe get some store credit, but it's not easy. On Taobao, you can buy anything you want. Within a 7-day period, you can always get a refund. Your money sits in the escrow account in Alipay. So the money doesn't go to the hands of the seller until 7 days later. So you have a chance to say, I don't want it. And that service level is much better than it is in the offline. In the offline world, there's taxes that people try not to pay. There's not a gray area. Online, there are no taxes. So it's much easier to do transactions online, very little friction. Initially, in China in 2005, you have to wait 2 weeks before you get your e-commerce shipment. These days, in all the major cities, the top 50 cities in China, you get it within 1 day. So JD, Jingdong, and Alibaba have made huge differences on the quality of service level in e-commerce in China. I remember in 2012, after my second child came out, my wife got an email from Taobao. Taobao says, hello, Mrs. Tung. Thank you for being a loyal supporter over the last 7 years. Over the last 7 years, we have seen 2 babies from you, and we are very happy. Congratulations on having your second baby, and we'll love to be able to support you and provide more services to meet your needs. The reason they know that is they know exactly what my wife has shopped from all the merchants there are on Ali over a 7-year period. So they know exactly what to say to make her want to buy more things. And this kind of personalization will never happen in the offline world. So when a new generation grow up using internet on PC or on smartphone, they're much more likely to shop and consume on the internet. And even a country as with so many people in China, when big shopping malls are affected, seeing less traffic, that's pretty scary. And retail is the first sector in any country that gets disrupted by internet the most immediately. Initially, it's the media, newspaper get disrupted, then comes e-commerce. Then what comes after that usually ends up being transportation and fintech, financial technology. So in transportation, we're investing in Didi, taxi in China. We know Uber very well. We're also an investor in Airbnb and also Tujia in China. We're helping Airbnb to go to Asia, spend more time with them in China as well. Because travel, like e-commerce, also get disrupted by internet quite a bit. In fintech, we're investing in a few companies in China. We're still looking for, we'll have a few investments in the US as well. That takes later to disrupt. So in each major country, you see retail, media, travel, retail, transportation, financial services. And this kind of changes are happening in India, in Southeast Asia, in Brazil as well. So if somebody, whether it's a startup or a VC, have a more global perspective, we start to see patterns happening of disruption from one sector to the other. If there's not a lot of disruption in retail, in e-commerce, not enough people will be paying and buying services on the internet. If people don't have payment, mobile payment, then the chance of transportation and financial services to get disrupted later is lower. So it has to happen step by step. And all these businesses that try to sell the e-commerce platform like Ali and Jingdong, the more they sell over those platforms, the more Jingdong and Ali know how good those businesses are because they see the transactions happening on their platform. So they can provide financial services, short-term working capital loans to these businesses so that over a period of time, you can build more businesses beyond just e-commerce. That's why a lot of companies in China, and we think down the road in India as well, will be almost conglomerate. They'll do many things growing with their consumers and small, medium business that sell on their platform. So I think I will conclude my presentation by saying that having been an investor in Xiaomi, having been an investor in Slack, having been an investor in Airbnb and Alibaba, it is very interesting to see how different sectors in society get disrupted by internet. And over a period of time, you can almost anticipate and guess what kind of company will be coming up next to solve issues that are fundamental to many societies. So we're very excited to work with entrepreneurs who want to build global businesses. And given our experience, we think we're pretty good at sharing what we have seen with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tong.
Any questions? Yes.
You said 20%, but would the Xiaomi and Alibaba investment be close to 20%?
We don't have 20% in
I don't think
Ali,
so.
no. is much smaller, but the outcome is also much, much bigger. So that's okay.
So how did you pick that 20%? I mean, I
In
understand
general,
this.
if you invest early, funds look for 20% ownership if you invest in Series A. Doesn't always happen, but that's what people strive for.
But it gets diluted later on, right?
That's right. You have to keep on investing to keep up your pro rata to maintain that 20%.
So by the time it goes to IPO, usually you'd only get a few percent.
They don't. But if the fund is big, they will keep on investing every round to make sure they keep that 20%. With both Xiaomi and Ali, our investment initially was small in terms of everybody wants to be in it. We only got a smaller allocation. So we'll continue to invest to keep our ownership, but it's less than 20%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, great talk. Just a question about Ali. As they enter markets outside of China, they're doing pretty well in Russia, right? Or it's
Right.
not so great now, but Spain, UK, US, how do you think they're going to fare in these markets where it's not their domestic market? They've done brilliantly in China, but like you were talking about, different cultures, different tastes, different demands. How are they going to fare?
We're an investor in a company called Wish. Not sure if you know. They're based in San Francisco, and all their merchants, most of them come from China, and they sell to consumers in US and Europe. JD is a strategic investor in Wish. At some point, if I were Alibaba, either I compete against Wish or figure out a way to buy Wish, because it's very difficult for a pure Chinese company to figure out how to crack US and European market. Having said that, I'm not sure you know the app called Musical.ly that's very popular in the US and Europe today. It's a music and live video app. There's a lot of sharing going on. A lot of middle school and high school students in US and Europe play with it. That company is based in Shanghai. So I think more and more you will see companies out of China that will have people that work outside of China to be able to do a global business from China. This is what I hope that more companies from Hong Kong and from Taiwan will have people that have been working outside of Hong Kong or Taiwan for a while to build a global business. So I think for Ali, I think they have to do more M&A. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tan, for the amazing speech.